Welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Adigbo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, we are officially done with the primaries. Also, it would seem, which of course is a significant stage in the lineup of processes leading up to the 2023 general elections. By the way, congratulations to Nigerians on the occasion of Democracy Day. And that's why on this episode we will be talking about democracy in Nigeria, arising, of course, from the June 12th celebration. I'd also use the opportunity to delve into other matters like class politics and how best to grow our democratic culture. Elizabeth is here, of course, and she's all prepped and eager to go. Elizabeth?
Well, away from our political matters, we'll be talking about infanticide, ending infanticide in Nigeria, because we observed that certain cultures still practice this.
That's fascinating, and of course it will be interesting to see how we can end that practice in Nigeria. Let's get started. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
National cash transfer is not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
you know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Adigbo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
I'll get straight into it and introduce my guest for this conversation on democracy in Nigeria, how far and how well. Professor Patu Tommy joins me from Lagos. He is the chairman coalition of political parties, that is the so-called third force. I wonder, Professor Tommy, what is the status of the third force?
Status of this coalition of parties.
Coalition of political parties. Yeah. Where are we with that at the moment?
We are in a stage where we have some candidates who are going to be collaborating, and in the end, there will be a coming together of some of the candidates.
Great, wonderful. We'll see,
new track.
We'll see how that goes. Of course, Professor Tom is joining us from Lagos. I also have Dr. Emmanuel Ozigi. He's a public and policy analyst with bias in financial economy. Dr. Ozigi, I know you're in Abuja, somewhere in Abuja. How are you today?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please go ahead. We can hear you. I was asking, how are you today?
I'm fine. Nnamdi.
Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Dr. Akin Falaye, he is also joining us from Lagos. He is okay, I understand we've just lost his connection, but of course, in the course of our discussion, Dr. Falaye, a former senior fellow of the National Institute for Legislative Studies here in Abuja, will be joining us in the course of our conversation. Let me begin with you, Dr. Ziggy. I mean, so 2 decades and 3 years of democracy in Fourth Republic Nigeria, and no doubt we have had major advances and retreats as well, I should say. Can you confidently say, though there are pockets of concern, that we are growing a robust democratic culture in Nigeria?
We've recorded, actually, cannot say it's a hooray for Nigeria at the moment, but no, it's better than previously when we were under the military rule or administration. We've recorded a bit of advancement in terms of governance and how things should be done, though we are still on a learning process. And I'm optimistic that we could get it better, but it's, a lot of people get discouraged looking at things should get better, but it appears that people are not a bit encouraged with what they are saying, and now people are pondering, is it going to be better? Thinking that it will be better, but of course I'm optimistic that we'll get better as time goes on.
Professor Otomi, you've just listened to Dr. Ziggy there talking about the prospect for a robust democratic culture in Nigeria. Are you as optimistic that things will get better, but that we are in the right, trajectory?
Well, hope is the most important ingredient in making progress. So we must be hopeful. I believe that if we keep working at it, we fall, we get up, and we keep at it. Like the child who's learning to walk, we will get to work eventually and walk the right way. However, it's had stops and starts that are too costly. Indeed, when you say Fourth Republic, I always question that usage, Fourth Republic. Is this the Fourth or Third Republic? The First Republic,
yes,
which was a short-lived 5 years, really. And then we had a civilian interregnum during a season of military rule, which was the Shagari era, in which I was an actor. And the thing that happened during the Babangida period, I'm not sure I can call that a republic, but anyway, people choose and pick what republic they call it. I like to talk about the Third Republic in a manner of speaking. However, the point is that we have had unbroken civilian governing. I hesitate to rush to use the word democracy. Unbroken civilian governing for 23 years, and we're learning.
Okay.
We must keep pointing out the things that go wrong, and we correct them and move forward.
Talking about learning, I have attempted to study democracies in multi-ethnic and diverse societies, and I'm intrigued at some of the findings. That I got, and how democratic practices vary from society to society. Again, in our own practice, what is or what are lacking in the supply side of democracy that is creating the trend of many dissatisfied Democrats? Take for instance, the growing mismatch in democratic values between the young and old. Those we know as millennials now. Professor Otomi, would you perhaps like to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, central to the idea of democracy is accountability, and the people are sovereign, that you work in the interest of the people. The majority in our country are young people, but our democracy does not respond to their interests. It responds to the interest of the powerful rather than the majority. And so this creates a problem why a majority, who are the young people, are unhappy.
Yes. Professor Tommy, very quickly, sorry to interject here. One, we seem to be having issues with your visual. It's the logo is interjecting, and very quickly see if we can, while we try to adjust that, can we also very quickly admit Dr. Falaye from Lagos? I understand he's also standing by, waiting for us to admit him. Okay, great. Yes, Professor Tommy, please continue.
Okay, so what I was saying is...
But we still can't see your face.
Democracy is about accountability.
Okay? Yeah, you're back now. We can see you now.
Right. Democracy is about accountability. And in being accountable, you look at the interests of the people, the majority of the people, and how you serve that well. In our democracy, there is a disconnect. The powerful are usually not the majority. And this is a function of state capture. And the way that our democracy has evolved. So what we need is to reconnect to the people and have a true government of the people, for the people, by the people. Unfortunately, what tends to happen a lot is that we have a government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians. And it gets compounded when money becomes the dominant factor in deciding how we select our leaders, as we saw in the recent conventions of political parties. So we need to reorganize political parties to begin by orienting their people to what democracy really means, to what service to the people means, to the politics of ideas, and not the politics of, can you muscle your way through votes. That way, democracy will work for the people. You know, there's this Afro barometer that was created across the continent and measures people's excitement about democracy and how they want it to work for them. In 1999, it was fantastic. Nigerians were so excited about this democracy that was coming. Today it's very low, and that's why voter turnout is pretty low. We have to work to reconnect to the people and ensure that the politics serves the people. So that's the way democracy will truly work.
Dr. Ziggy, I know you've listened to what Professor Tommy has been saying. Do you perhaps, by chance, agree, or do you differ in your opinion on this issue, the mismatch and disconnect between different strata of the Nigerian population, and where we're having dissatisfied Democrats, I should say?
Yeah, actually, I have just add to Professor Tommy's assertion, because you can see people are dissatisfied in the sense that it's becoming more of money politics. People who are actually interested or qualified to run for government or run for governance position find it difficult to gain access, because it's already blocked by those who have access to fund and to dispose this fund at will without care. People who are actually qualified cannot do that because they find that they don't have an opportunity to even enter or have an opportunity to even know what to do, because they've been pushed out, they've been locked out. And that's why you are seeing a lot of dissatisfaction from the political point of politicians who are actually qualified to do or to occupy position. And to a large extent, I will agree with Prof that people are dissatisfied because there's that strata, social strata or monetary arrangements that people are easily taken away with. And it's unfortunate that even the electorate that should enjoy governance find it difficult to demarcate what they will get now and what they stand to benefit tomorrow. So unless we have a lot of advocacy and changing mindsets of the electorate to say, look, you had better reject this. And I think it should be institutionalized too. Because we cannot continue like this. And you will see that instead of getting better, we'll get worse for it.
Do we have Dr. Falai online at this time? Oh, okay. I understand we do not have... gentlemen, so I mean, we'll continue the conversation until Dr. Falai joins us from Lagos. But, you know, even when I want to overlook the fact that ethnic politics is pervasive in Nigeria, I mean, events and emerging trends are often quick to remind me that we indeed still have that challenge on our hands. So aside the 1993 elections, maybe, some would say voting along ethnic and religious leanings are noticeable attributes of elections in Nigeria. How can accountable governance assist to reverse that trend and play up the imperatives for democracy and development simultaneously, rather than ethnic politics? Professor Tommy.
Yeah, well, when political parties have a very clear vision of the world they want to create and socialize those who are joining them to be able to operationalize that vision, sometimes we call it an ideology and all kinds of things, what we're going to have is people who are, steeped in identity politics, cluster around people that they can identify with. Politics and the political process and democracy begin first and foremost with citizenship. And citizens are people who engage in rational public conversation about what's the greater good of society, in spite of whatever their different interests may be. Then you find interest group politics will begin to dominate. But when you don't have issues, identity politics becomes the key driver of the electoral machines that you have. And these have not been very healthy for us. But the example of 1993, which you mentioned, shows that, bottom line, we have a shared humanity, and we all want the same things out of life for our children, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion, and all of that. The more the political actors have something to offer, the more we will move away from identity politics. But when you get people whose only reason for entering the political process is that they found some money. The incentive is for more, sorry to say, criminals who have made their money through, that is 419, state looting of the treasury, or whatever, to become the dominant players in politics. And such people usually don't have the capacity to deal with the issues that will make people's lives better. And so the only thing they have to offer is where they come from, or what language they speak, what religion they identify with. And these are the things that deepen identity politics and make our democracy less stable. But if issues dominated process, and that's really how South Korea fixes elections. They used to have politics of money bags like we do have. At a point in time, the Electoral Commission decided that the way to go would be to essentially insist that politics should be about debates. That you will have debates in the classrooms, on the streets, in the gymnasia of schools, and issues alone will be point of politics. After a while, all the money bags ran away, and South Korean politics was healed. I mean, I know that Professor Dahu Yiga, when he was INEC chair, visited the South Korean Electoral Commission, and they told them this. And this is how we fixed it in South Korea. And I've been trying to challenge the system to do that. Insist that before anybody goes to an election, he must go through a series of debates. That way, the process will weed out those who have no idea about what to do with public life.
Professor Tommy, you and I will talk a bit more on the selection process and criteria, but then let me quickly bring in Dr. Ziggy here, if you're there, Dr. Ziggy. So I know you have you're likely to have a strong opinion on the leadership, selection process in Nigeria. The current process has been highly criticized by some notable Nigerians, more so quite recently. Do you think, like Professor Tommy just said, that this is a function of inadequate electoral process despite recent reforms, in the sector, that the criteria for candidate selection are just not expansive enough to throw up perhaps the best leaders, and in terms of both elective and appointive positions?
Yes, I quite agree with Prof, because when you look at the recent that happened, someone just called me from Accra after the primaries and said, "Oh, when will your country stop this money politics? When will you get it right?" And I was amazed. I was a bit embarrassed, because when you see people who are actually, I'm not saying people who have the money that are contesting are not eligible. They are eligible. You see, the issue is we are looking at it, it's no longer issue based. It's now money based politics. And you see, people who are actually qualified or eligible, who have something to say, just like, if I may quote Prof, those who can deliver, those who are able, who have the capacity to deliver what governance is all about. It's very difficult to gain entrance. And the moment, because they don't have the resources or the money, quote and unquote, as Prof said, looted funds of money stolen and now displaying it publicly to buy up votes. I think we shouldn't buy votes. If you feel you are qualified, we should have representatives from each zones that elect people or select people or whichever means they use.
But Dr. Ziggy, are you pushing the bulk of the problem to the political class alone? Do you not think that as average citizens, ordinary citizens, you and I may just be part of the problem as well? We've seen, we saw what played out during the primaries. Are we saying, for instance, that, look, it is the politician who perhaps brought in money to, pay off delegates that is the problem? Are we not even looking at the delegates themselves? People who accepted to collect this money, are they not complicit and part of this problem as well?
They are. Absolutely, they are 100%. But you see, the issue is that the system is being made that way. A lot of people are now understanding that the best way you can enrich yourself every 4 years is to be involved in the process. And then also, okay, because after 4 years, they will not be able to have access to them again. They now look at this as an opportunity to make their own ends meet, because they will not have opportunity either directly or indirectly to earn any income or any opportunity within that period, because they don't understand that these people that spend this money are only going there to recover their money back because an investment. And when you look at it from that point of view, you will be able to assess that, well, if that's the case, it's obvious. The essence of bad governance we've been experiencing is a result of people go in, expend funds, then are expecting them to recover the money back. Because, I mean, they're not just doling out the money anyhow. They want to get their funds back. And in view of that, whatever you are seeing in terms of bad governance is a result of that. It's a trickle effect. So, as individuals or the electorate, they've lost confidence in governance. And as a result of the fact that they are now sure, and that the system has made it in a way that it's institutionalized poverty, or it impoverished them, so that the only opportunities for them to have access during processes like this. So, I apart from the fact that I'm looking at it from the electorate point of view. Even the political class have used it as a strategy to weed out people who can actually deliver. They're now coming with very few people that they've just displayed. Some of them are underdressed. But I'm not going into that. The key issue is that our political system is still money-based. The issue of philosophy, the issue of issue-based politics is still not addressed.
Money apparently is the albatross of politics in Nigeria. It will seem at the moment, if you have money, it can make you. Without money, you may just, with your ideas, remain where you are. But of course, that's part of why, that's why we're having this conversation. And yet again, Professor Utomi, there is the matter of the integrity of our electoral process and the infusion, for instance, of the biometrics voting features into the system, which is now officially backed by law. I totally understand that the single most important function of an election is the selection of a government. But in doing so, how do these laws help the citizenry to first hold government accountable, and secondly, function as a platform to have their views and interests properly represented? Professor Utomi.
Right. The beauty of democracy is that if a government doesn't perform to your expectation, you can remove it at a certain time interval. Whether it's 2 years as the House of Reps in America, or it's 4 years like in our country, you know that these guys are going to be out because you don't like what they're doing. But there is a sense in our country that it doesn't matter what you do as citizens, that you can remove these fellows. Now, that is damaging to democracy. If you look at why democracies function as they do in some parts of the world, what that forces is a constant listening to the people. In fact, politicians sometimes overdo it in some parts of the world. They won't even make a move without looking at the opinion polls. What do the people feel? And then they take that traction and that direction. But here, they can totally forget the people, because first of all, the alternative people who can give the ideas, you know that the process is completely rigged. The political parties are the real problem. Political parties are structured to eliminate good people. I can tell you that. I've been through all of them. I've been close to all of them. Their process is captured by some people who own, quote unquote, own the party. And so they eliminate people from coming in.
Prof, if I am not mistaken, you are part of this system. You are part of this same system that you're condemning, or rather criticizing very strongly, I should say.
Very strongly, I do. I have been part of it. I helped set it up in many cases, and I saw it hijacked by people who don't share the same values. It's about values, really. Values shape human progress. Unfortunately, our system has allowed people whose values don't align to social progress to capture the process. And that's why we're suffering. But it's possible to change these things. We've seen it happen in some countries, and it can happen here. It should happen here in the greater long-term best interest of everybody. And I think that if we get to a point that we can get to, where people now feel helpless, hopeless, they begin to act in a non-democratic way, and you get the kind of violence we have everywhere. Look, insecurity we have in our country is significantly because people feel that their voices are lost. Stephen R. Covey, the great author of The 7 Habits, tells you that the 8th habit, or the great habit of the 21st century, is helping people find their voice. When democracy does not work for the people and they feel that they don't have a voice, in the end they find other outlets, and those outlets become violent expressions, and everybody loses from it. And that's what we must try and stop by making our democracy work.
Very, very true, Professor Otomi. I do agree with you there. I'll just go over to Dr. Ozigi. You know, over the last decades, particularly, we've seen a judiciary that stands firm against abuses of power and executive overreach, where election results, for instance, were annulled due to misconduct and irregularities in the processes leading to the outcome, of course. Just how important is an independent judiciary to a fledgling democracy like ours in Nigeria?
Just having the proponents of that, I don't think the judiciary still have independence.
Oh, okay.
Because you have an overwhelming influence of the government or the government of the day over judiciary, their activities, their operations, their funding, and all these things. If they're on the first line charge, and probably the judiciary is independent, so quote and unquote, and you would say that some of the operations, some of their rulings, some of their judgments will be independent. And those who feel our judiciary is the best place that I can go to and get judgment, you would say that people will have confidence in them. But I must tell you that people don't have confidence in the judiciary, because most people, especially the electoral class or the political class, feel that, okay, if you are disgruntled or if you are angry, the best place, we will all meet in the court. And they, of course, they know that they will overrule the court. I'm not saying, I don't have evidence to say that the judges are compromising, but I'm saying that they have overwhelming influence of the government of the day. So in view of this, those who are less privileged, who do not have access, find it difficult to obtain or to access judgment, and it's objective. So that's my own point of view.
Professor Otomi, I'll quickly like your take on this issue. I mean, is this something you agree with? Professor Otomi? Do we still have Professor Otomi with us?
I am very much with you. Sorry.
Yes, please. Professor Ozigi just responded. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, you know, the thing about the judiciary is that a system of checks and balances is critical to democracy. The judiciary is supposed to be a major check, the branch, and vice versa.
We seem to be having some issue with your connection from Lagos. Okay, while we wait and see and try to re-establish connection with Professor Otomi, I'll go back to Dr. Ozigi real quick and then try to redirect our conversation along the lines of class politics and consensus building, and how that has, perhaps fostered our democracy. Dr. Ziggy, are you there?
I'm with you, please.
Okay, great. So in other climes, like I do know in the US, I mean, class politics actually engenders, throws up a situation where only individuals who meet the relevant criteria of qualification, knowledge, experience, vision, skill, wisdom and courage, amongst other things, of course, are put forward by political parties for positions. And I'm talking about whether it's elective or appointive positions. Well, speak to me about the correlation between consensus building and class politics and how, one promotes the other. Perhaps you can begin with how class politics fosters democracy in the first instance and ensures competitiveness, that allows only the best to emerge in democracies.
Well, as you said, in best practice countries where politics is practiced and people enjoy politicking, you have the issue of class class politics, where people who are eligible, who are capable, who are qualified, who are competent, have been brought up by the party itself from the beginning. That process is exhaustive. I mean, it's been exhausted at the political level, at the political party level, where they select the candidates that can match or that can compete favorably with an opposition party. Where when they come up, you see that they can competitively compete, and it will be difficult for you to say, okay, we are going for a consensus candidate. Of course, from the party point of view, we will have finished all the relevant or whatever processes they need to. An example is in the US, and you can see that, especially during the period of Obama or the period of the current president, we can see they exhaust all their internal processes. They just come up with someone, and that everything will have been concluded, and you come up with someone that is competitive, not somebody that everybody just looking at. Is it because he has just one advantage, or maybe in terms of funding or in terms of the patronage? He's had a lot of patronage in the party, and as a result of that, you compensate. It's not a compensatory system. Ours is a compensatory system. When people look at it that, oh, because this person has expended so much, has stayed with the party so much, we should compensate. The aspect of competence, the aspect of delivery, the aspect of governance, the aspect of accountability, transparency, so are key points that need to be looked at. Because even looking at the person's disposition to governance, all this must be checked. But as you said, Nigeria, it's better to look at that aspect of consensus just coming up. We're just looking at it for the first time. This is a period where I think we're just looking at it for the first time. I mean, it's a good idea if everybody accepts. But I can tell you that not everybody will accept for consensus.
Yes.
There's no way you can do it, yes. Because especially if you have lots of people who are interested in delivering, everybody wants to play.
Of course, I agree with you there, because in fact it's been said that consensus in some cases can also be a negation of the principle of inclusiveness and participatory democracy.
Yes.
Is that perhaps what you mean?
No, freedom of participation, yes. You don't have freedom to participate. And as a result of that, a lot of people get angry over it and probably look away of what's called in Nigerian climate, look at what's called intra-party activities. Now you're in a party, but your allegiance is to the other party because you feel the other party is accepting your idea or your philosophy. So this party where you intend to maybe showcase your strength, your capacity, actually because of certain class, a certain exclusion or exclusion strategy, you are excluded. You are angry about it and you find it difficult to. So you see people who are in one party, but the allegiance is on the other party. And that's actually what some of these consensus issues might cause.
Okay, great. We're fast losing time. Let me quickly bring in Professor Otomi, if we have him back. Professor Otomi, we lost you there for a minute. Are you with us now?
Yeah, obviously some internet connection, but I am back. I've been
okay, great. But we need you to, your visual is slanted to the side. We need you to put it on landscape so we can see you properly. I mean, you may have to turn it. Yes, please see. Please rotate your video. Rotate, auto rotate. That's yes, auto rotate. Yes, fantastic. Now we have you back. Now we have you back. That's great. Yes, please. We were talking about just when we lost you there, Professor Ziggy and I were talking about the correlation between class politics and consensus building, and how in other climes class politics engenders competitiveness and throws up begs candidates, especially for elections. In Nigeria, why is class politics not engendering same and helping us perhaps throw up the best candidate for elections?
Well, because the crystallization of classes is still in a very infant stage. I mean, Larry Diamond, in his book on the death of the First Republic, essentially looks at ethnicity, class, and political parties in Nigeria, who were an early rudimentary formation of class interests. What essentially dominates in Nigeria is, individual interests masquerading as interests of groups. And because of that, consensus building is more challenged. And this is why state capture is prevalent. If there was a class interest, in fact, I argue that many of the people who act in Nigerian politics act against their class interest because they think they can secure short-term personal advantage. And the things that they then do ultimately disadvantages their entire class, including themselves, in the medium term, but it gives them short-term benefit. So it makes things like consensus candidates actually a joke of sorts, because it's a way of just imposing the will of the powerful, and it's called consensus. People should debate issues, and between the positions and how those advance certain policy areas, you can coalesce into a certain, if you want to call them, group consciousness above and beyond the primordial, to use to advance the course of where the country should be going.
Very quickly, I'll just take one more responses each from both of you, so we can round up. I understand we're completely out of time now. Dr. Ozigi, I'd like to bring you in here as a policy analyst, but let me take you up on the issue of democracy and the economy. We know democracy generally engenders a free market and promotes capitalism, but here in Nigeria, I could say we have a situation where capitalism may have become another source of rising inequality and a system that has completely eroded the middle class. Why is our democratic capitalism less inclusive so that capitalists are more invested or interested in creating more wealth at the expense of the public good?
Yeah, actually, as you said, Nigeria is still finding difficult to, the middle class has been eroded as a result of the institution. Capitalism in Nigeria actually is taken to the extreme in the sense that the political class have used this as a means of pauperizing the people, the citizens. And one of the key areas for you to gain power or control is to make people to pauperize the system so that people are now at the beck and call to whatever decision you give them, so they take. And as Prof. rightly said earlier, it has degenerated into a lot of crises where people who cannot vent their anger, they come up with a different way of venting it and affect the whole system. And it's all these things that you've had now, like issue of all this terrorism, all this kidnapping and banditry here and there. There's lots of some of these issues that some people cannot vent their anger. That's the only way they can do it. And you look at it down south, you're having so many different kind of things coming up here and there. People are dissatisfied. And because of this, a lot of people find it difficult. Let's look at it from the aspect of even from the middle class. Previously, we looked at civil servant, probably maybe they are the middle class people who are working, but that system has been eroded. If you're either up there or you're down there. And for you to survive in a country like this, you are forced, it's a force, you are forced to align with what is going on. So you are forced to accept what is not normal. And so that note, we said the capitalism, the system the politicians are using in Nigeria actually erodes any form of inclusiveness.
Well, let's quickly round off our conversation here and bring in Professor Otomi. So, I mean, you've listened to Dr. Ziggy. I mean, we are seeing elevated commodity prices, disruptions in food supply chains. We're seeing shortages and the economy still struggling to recover from the impact of COVID-19, of course, exacerbated by the crisis in Europe between Russia and Ukraine now. I mean, but come to think of it, Professor Otomi, even almighty America, which is the democracy model, I mean, is feeling the pinch. I'm sure you have read and digested Adam Smith's classic, The Wealth of Nation, of course. And so my question, and the book, of course, is done the foundational text for modern idea of the free economy. But still, my question to you is this, okay? Does economic liberty serve and strengthen political freedom? Or does the pursuit of self-interest undermine the moral qualities necessary for self-governance or government?
If you have the right institutions, the pursuit of self-interest will actually lead to an expansion of the common good interests. The way that Smith argues it. The problem is that our institutions are weak, and what we have is not capitalism. We have a rentier state, and we have people who extract economic rent being called capitalists. They're not capitalists. If they're capitalists, you see job creation that come from capital. It's so rich, and it doesn't employ 100 people. Usually, by the time a man gets very rich through creative destruction, through real capitalism, you will see thousands of jobs which will create that middle class that we are talking about that becomes the balancer in society. We don't have capitalists here. We have people who, because of connection to government, have extracted rent and have a lot of money, buy private jets, but they are creating no value in society. In normal democracies, the first issue to be discussed is job creation, interest rates, and stuff like that facilitates the better life for most of the citizens.
Professor Tommy, unfortunately, we're out of time. We've struggled a bit with your internet connection from Lagos, but I think we've been able to glean quite a significant, some significant bit from your thoughts on this matter. I mean, they've been quite profound. I would like to thank you so much for coming on Insight. Of course, Dr. Emmanuel Ozigi, public and policy analyst, financial economist as well. I'd also like to thank you so much for coming on Insight. Unfortunately, Dr. Akin Falaye couldn't join us in this conversation, but of course, there's still an opportunity. We'll create a forum and then we'll bring all three gentlemen to the studio. Professor Tommy, good seeing you again. Thank you so much for joining us from Lagos.
It's a great pleasure. I'm glad to have joined.
Dr. Ziggy,
thank you.
I hope to see you soon on Insight as well.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you so much. Up next is Elizabeth Omori for the rest of the program.
Infanticide is among the leading causes of infant deaths, with infants at particularly high risk during the first year of life. Many of these deaths can be attributed to extreme abuse. Maternal risk factors for infanticide include young age, low educational attainment, history of exposure to domestic violence, and late prenatal care. This practice has often been interpreted as a primitive method of birth control and a means of ridding a group of its weak and deformed children. The question is, don't these children have the right to life and to live? There are, however, efforts to stop this practice, and the country director, Action Aid, NAOB, will lead the conversation on the issue before us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Mrs. Ene.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, what is your thought on this primitive practice?
Infanticide it's a very sad thing to be talking about this, this century that you're talking about, infant mortality, in respect of infanticide, and the way the practice is going on is a question of the practice, the culture of some communities. We are working with about 65 communities where they consider the birth of twins almost as a taboo. And that is that if you are born twins, triplets, quadruplets, or if you lose your mother for maternal mortality, that is at birth, or even when a mother dies while breastfeeding, that the children are considered as taboos. And to find out that this is happening in the Federal Capital Territory, in some communities around the Federal Capital Territory, is very embarrassing. But we're not giving up, because cultural practices are things that have existed in the systems for a very long time. And so for Action Aid Nigeria found the practice in some of these communities, and there is a missionary that decided to start rescuing the children. One can only imagine, in our imaginations, how many children died or were killed before the man started rescuing them. And so we have been working with that, the pastor who's rescuing these children. If you go to the house any day, you are seeing fresh children. If you go today now, maybe some children have just been rescued. And some of these children have already been poisoned to die. But those who have heard, that the children, who knew where those rescuing the children are able to run with the children and into the house. So we are quite excited that at least we're happy that we're able to rescue, assist in rescuing some of these children. Currently, they have 158 children are in this house, and they are in different age categories. Some of them are teenagers, some of them have even gained admission to the university, some of them are now in the university, and then you have little children, you have children that are either day old or a few months old, that are in the house. You have very young children. What we found out is that the house that they're living in is becoming smaller. They need places to play as they get older. They needed more facilities. So we were able to collaborate with the European Union, and it happened because of a visit by the European ambassador. The then European ambassador, went to the house, and he felt something needed to be done. And that's how we started the process of going in and facilitating. So we have now built a big structure.
Let's deal more on this practice. Is this peculiar with Africans, or just a thread of being irrational?
If you can go back to a little to history, children were being, twins and multiple births were being killed in so many parts of Nigeria in the past before the coming of Mary Celeste. But everybody thought that the practice is now over. And so people are relaxed. And what we also found on the journey for this stopping the infanticide is that the practices are not over in some parts of the country. But for now, we're working only in the FCT. We're happy that the European Union ambassador, Ambassador Emanuela Isopi, was able to go and launch the building, to open up the building herself, and she promises that we need to continue, and we are calling on others as well, that the children have a right to live, and that the children are blessings. We'll continue to work with the communities. The last children that we had taken from the home was in collaboration, and we ensure that the National Human Rights Commission is involved. They are on ground. There's a multi-stakeholder involvement, so that these children, they don't take them home. Because I remember a case of where a chief who heard that his grandchild was still alive came to find out whether the chief, whether the child has killed the pastor or the pastor has killed the child. But they found the child alive and well, and he was surprised. But they still don't want the children back into their homes because they still consider them, evil. Out of 65 communities, about 57 are still raw in the practice. And we found out also that some of the new children that are being brought are not actually from the original 57 or 65 that we had identified, which means the practice is beyond the borders.
Talking about these practice actually, how can we curb this? How can parents love their children, leaving the defects, focusing on the life God has given them, or the gift God has given them?
In the advocacy work that we are doing is involving the traditional rulers, opinion leaders in the community, mothers in the community, because when multiple births come, you find out too that many times women get, when they give birth to twins, they even follow up with triplets and then quadruplets. So that you can imagine that some women have had so many children, but they have none to hold. You can imagine a woman in that light losing your children because of cultural belief. It's changing the orientation. It's also letting them know that we have the Child Rights Act, and every child has a right to live, and be able to sensitize them enough to let them know that we are watching together, we are working together, we are not leaving them away. Take the children home. They deserve to be loved, because even when you take children and you adopt children, they always like to know who gave birth to them, if they have the opportunity to see their real parents. And so we continue to work. And that's why we're working with the National Human Rights Commission, because the Constitution, protects every child.
How would we strengthen our reorientation or sensitization, or better still, advocacy on this issue, if the traditional institution is not playing its role? Because it starts from the family. And when you talk about the family, tradition comes into play. Culture comes into play.
It's for us to strengthen that and ensure that they can reach out more to the people. The political leaders ought to be involved. If you are there as a human being to see these children, lovely children, that their parents don't want them, it's shocking to the core. But again, we have to gradually try to see what we can do for them.
Let me take you on the role of the government this time around. What role should the government be playing to ensure that we reduce the number of children we have in that home? Because it will be our joy, and I think your joy as well, when the number drops totally.
Category of the children also expands to children with albinism, or children with learning difficulties, or children with disability. Also part of the children that are in this category, and you find them in the home as well. Where they took these children from, you can't even take them to school there. Because if you take them to school, they are not, other children will leave the class. Because these children are considered evil. But we are changing that orientation, and we hope that at the end of the day, more children leave the home, that edifice will be changed to something else, and not taking children who are being born, who are being discriminated against. Children deserve to be loved, and that discrimination must stop, and the Child Rights Act is enforced. That's why we're having Human Rights Commission, and other aspects are involved, that even when you take them home, we still monitor these children to see that no harm comes to them. And we're working in collaboration with the police as well, and we are grateful to them so far. And so the next level is, how do we sustain? You asked a question about the government. I think the government needs to move in, really fully, in terms of even giving a budget. Insurance for the children, I think that is one area that both the Ministry of Women Affairs and any relevant agency should need to move into. Because I remember we lost a child, early this year. Was it early this year? And this girl who had just gained admission to the university had I think it had to do with appendix, or so. And the pastor rushed to us. He said, I don't have enough money, and this girl, this is the situation. We had to rush about 300,000, which they requested for about 250,000. We rushed in 300,000. Anything you need to do, save this girl. Unfortunately, we lost her. I think it's really great that we're having so many Nigerians that are putting their hands, and there's a lot that we can do, and so much more can be done, and we are not leaving them. I just want to assure you that we're not leaving them, and the struggle will continue for these children realize their rights.
The struggle will continue. Yeah. NLB Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time on Insights.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Amina Mohammed, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Williams, reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Deadline 360.
Naja Atiti.
Deadline 360. Shidi Okrafo.
For Deadline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Deadline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in to Deadline 360.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insights. My name is Nnamdi Odigbo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.